Welcome back to another episode of Till the Wheels Fall Off. I'm Matt.
I'm Paige.
Today we are joined by Matt and Sheri Salis from Untoxicated Podcast. You've probably heard of it. There are not a lot of people doing what we do in this space. They came before us. They are some of the OGs in this space, and you are not going to want to miss this one. Before we get started on that, let's get through some quick house cleaning items. Please, if you haven't already, review, follow, tell your friends, give us some feedback on the show. It pushes that stuff up the algorithm so it's more discoverable for people, so that if you've been helped from the show, other people can also get help from the show. Leave us a quick review, follow it, subscribe to it on YouTube as well. We would very much appreciate that. Oh, also go check us out on Instagram, because TikTok may not be around for very long. I know that a lot of you have discovered us on TikTok, but that may be going away on Sunday. So check us out on Instagram. We are also over there. Head over to our website, twfo.com, to find out everything that you need to know about what we do. If you want merch, if you want to check out our blog and newsletter, if you want to join our free Facebook community, you can get all of that there at twfo.com. That is tufo.com. We just got a new run of sweatshirts in. We've got recovery rocks. We've got stickers. We've got t-shirts. We've got hats. You name it. It's up there. So if you want to support the show, rep the gear. It's a great way to do it. We've also got a course that we built called Independently Strong. You've heard us talk about this. If you want to know how we did it, we've packaged it into a course with a licensed therapist, Dr. Christopher Taylor. It is called Independently Strong. It doesn't matter if you want to stay or if you want to go. This course was built for you. Its goal is to empower you through our process that we call VEER. We will validate, educate, empower, and help you recover. It offers hope to those people that are wanting to move out of a relationship, and also those that want to stay in. It lets them know what real recovery looks like and what you can expect on the upcoming years that you stay together. We're an alternative to programs like Al-Anon. Our aim is simple. We help spouses and partners live a life of their own choosing, rooted in reality. We give you the tools and the understanding to make choices with confidence, not fear, confidence, whether that means repairing a relationship or moving on to a healthier future. You can get 75% off that course using the code WHEELIES75 at checkout. That's Wheelies with an S, 75 at checkout. And lastly, thank you to SoberLink for sponsoring this episode. SoberLink's been an amazing sponsor of our show and of Untoxicated. They are mutual here. And they've been so great to work with. I mean, I tell you, like, one of our big things was, I'm not going to promote anything that we wouldn't use ourselves. I'm not going to promote anything that would try to change the way that we deliver a message. And they've been so great about doing every bit of that. They've been excellent to work with. If you don't know what SoberLink is, think of it as like the world's most high-tech breathalyzer. It uses military-grade facial recognition so that you know who's blowing into that thing. And it's portable and it's sleek, and you can use it anywhere, home, work, on vacation. It does not matter. You can schedule tests so that you know when stuff is upcoming. They are not going to randomly drop one on you. And if something's off, they have a team on standby 24/7. Real people, not just AI that everyone's trying to shove down our throats. This are real people on the other side of this information looking at this data to make sure that it is accurate. They are not interested in picking sides. They are interested in providing the most data, the most accurate data possible, so that you can show sobriety when it really matters. And if you're in any kind of a custody agreement, there's no other way that I would go about it. If my children were going somewhere and I was unsure about someone drinking or not, I would make sure that I had this written into that agreement. It is court admissible in all 50 states and in Canada, and it is trusted by over 200,000 people. It is considered the gold standard in court. SoberLink has been generous enough to offer our listeners $50 off a device by going to soberlink.com/wheels. Again, that's soberlink.com/wheels to sign up and get your coupon. And with that, we are on to the episode. So Matt and Sheri, thank you both so much for joining us. Late night here. We do these a lot. We've never, like I mentioned earlier, we were trying to get the mics to go, never had anyone else stay up this late with us. So thank you. Thank you two so much for being here with us.
Well, we've heard in listening to your episodes that this is the typical recording time for you. I don't know how you do it. I don't know if I could hate myself enough to do this every week at this time. I feel like I'm already back to coffee. Like I'm just pretending it's tomorrow morning.
Careful with that trick. I've tried that before, and I was up till 6 a.m.
He did that recently.
It was awful.
He drank it at like 5 or 6 o'clock, and he was up all night. I was like, are you on something? Like, this is weird that you were up all night long.
I knew I was in deep shit like at 1 or 2 o'clock, and I wasn't tired. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just keep watching the show then. I'll just keep going.
It was weird.
Well,
so be careful.
Caffeine has that effect on me too. So I'm just trying to trick myself. This is actually peppermint tea.
Okay, good.
And I'm pretending it's coffee, like to keep revved up. I don't know.
Well, the peppermint will keep you peppy.
There you go.
Okay, so for our listeners that don't know, how long have you two been doing your podcast?
Oh, well, the first 8 episodes were me and a friend of mine named Jason. It was actually his idea. It was about addiction and recovery with no guidelines or direction whatsoever. We did 8 episodes. We interviewed a few people, and then he bailed on me. And I said, Sheri, we wanted to interview you at some point anyway. Would you be episode 9? And she agreed to do it reluctantly, and it was going to be a one-time deal. But the reaction that we got to that initial episode with Sheri was so strong that we eventually twisted her arm to become my podcast partner. So we started the Echoes of Recovery program over COVID. So I think that episode was the very beginning of 2020 or the end of 19.
End of 19.
Yeah.
I think it was the end of 19 because you were doing that as we were wrapping up our bakery business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 5+ years. Something like that.
Awesome. And I'm sure hundreds of episodes at this point, tons of content, tons of conversations about this stuff. So you are experts in what we are discussing here today.
We have lots of lived experience. I shy away a little from expert, but we definitely have learned a lot through our own experiences, and we've met a ton of people. I know, much like what your experience has been. So it's great to gather knowledge through other people's stories rather than necessarily from reading books. Although I did read a lot of books too. Let's
get into the early stages of your marriage and relationship. Let's set the scene a little bit. We're going to spend a little bit of time here just to give people some context. What were the early years of the marriage like? And then how did addiction change the dynamic between the two of you?
Well, we always had been drinkers together in college. I always got hungover, and I never understood why. Then the next day he could be like, hey, let's go out for drinks, after class and that sort of stuff. So I didn't really understand that at that point that he was not getting hangovers and that he was able to bounce back, and that was just kind of his drug of choice in college. And so I knew it was there. But I think when you are in your early to mid 20s, you kind of expect that bar scene to kind of after college continue. And then you just kind of settle into maturity when you start, not even when you're having children, just when you start getting your like kind of real jobs out of college. So I kind of had the expectation that it would slow down, be a little more regular, be a little bit more like what I grew up with. Like for me, drinking was very social. In his upbringing, his dad had a drink or two every night when he got home from work. Not in an alcoholic sense. It was always very controlled. It was very mature, responsible. This is what adults do, kind of marketed to him early on. So when we started living together and we were out of college, we were out of state from our friends and family, I didn't see anything changing. And he met some people through work, and his work was, like everybody says, is a drinking industry. So there was a lot of drinks with customers when he would go out with dinner with customers. The people he worked with, a lot of them were drinkers. And of course, Matt found himself really befriending like one of the heaviest drinkers in his office. And, then they kind of became our joint friends. And I did approach you about it and was slightly confused and curious about why there wasn't maturity, why we weren't slowing down. And he had a lot of answers like, well, this is just how it is. This is what adults do. And I think already at that point, like even early as in that point, you were saying things like, well, your father was an alcoholic, so you just don't understand what real mature drinking looks like, non-issue drinking looks like.
Yeah.
Would you say that's fair?
She's seeing red flags to at least some extent early on, and I'm telling her she's not seeing what she's seeing already because I knew her family history had alcohol problems, and my family history had alcohol glorification. So I was definitely gaslighting and manipulating, not in an evil sense. I didn't know I was doing that. I was just, recapping what our growing up lives looked like. And to me, there was nothing wrong with what I was doing. I mean, I don't know of a work environment where you can't find other people that drink heavily and they normalize it for you. So certainly not trying to shift the blame off of myself to anyone else, but there were lots of bushes for me to hide behind early on. That's for sure.
And so when did things turn for you guys? How long were you married before this shit hit the fan?
That's a great question. It was definitely progressive. It was slow progression. I have long said that I had 10 years of active addiction, which would have been about 07 to 17. And the only thing I can use to pinpoint that decade, because I had been a heavy drinker since experimenting in high school. I graduated high school in 91. So I've been drinking for a long time, but that 10-year period from 7 to 17 was from the first time I tried to quit drinking when our daughter was 5, our first child was 5, until I finally made it over the hump in 17, 10 years later. And so there wasn't necessarily a defining moment when I entered into addiction. There wasn't a big rock bottom. In fact, you've long said, Sheri, that my worst drinking was actually a few years before I quit, because toward the end, I was trying to hold on to something that was becoming glaringly clear was going to be unsustainable. Mm-hmm. I had depression and anxiety problems that were mounting. And for a long time, I thought the alcohol was the solution to the depression and anxiety because it would alleviate the symptoms, but then the depression and anxiety would come raging back. And it took me a long time to put 2 and 2 together and understand that alcohol was the reason for that. So that was one of the, big driving, motivating factors in eventual sobriety. The other one was Sheri's detachment. We got to the point where she was just done with me. She had tried cajoling and yelling and screaming and calling my parents and, pouring out alcohol and counting and not counting and just everything you can think of. We, of course, went through all the rules that I would put around drinking. I'm only going to drink beer, no hard alcohol. I'm only going to drink on the weekends. I'm going to count how many I drink, just everything you can think of. And so I would say 2014, 15 was my worst drinking. We certainly have some really traumatic experiences, but nothing that was rock bottom. I never had legal problems, never had big financial problems. I certainly wish I had the money back that I spent on booze. Mm-hmm. Never had problems with employment, but a couple of years of going through the rule setting and the trying to keep it in my life, even though it was becoming increasingly clear it wasn't going to work. Finally, in 17, I was just in so much pain from the depression and anxiety and from the fact that Sheri had, largely turned her back. She had to protect herself and the kids, and she didn't have any bandwidth left to try to talk me into quitting drinking.
Mm-hmm. Sheri, did you naturally detach, or was it a process for you? Did you learn it somewhere, or did it just kind of happen?
It just kind of happened. I was so worried about seeking any outside help. Matt was very much we had, like he said, this 10-year kind of period where he was in an active addiction trying to quit. We were having a lot of conversations about it, a lot of arguments about it, but there was this secrecy. You can't say anything. You can't do anything. So I was not terrified. Maybe that's a little bit extreme. I was so worried about letting the secret out. I was so worried about him finding me researching on the computer or getting books. I remember picking them up from another county, from the library, and I was just reading it there while the kids were at a story time. And then I returned the book, so I did not have any education going into this. So I just did it naturally. It was like a self-preservation, because I had tried in one of our recent podcasts, we kind of talk about the fight, flight, fawn, freeze. And I was very much a fighter. I thought just yelling louder and arguing more was going to get what I wanted with him to stop drinking. And then
that spunkiness is what attracted me to you originally.
Yeah, he says it's spunky. I feel like it was a little bit of beating my head against the wall, not knowing what I was up against. Then I would
didn't work at all.
It didn't work. Exactly.
Very attractive.
And then I would, I would try to like leave arguments, leave a situation that when I didn't want to be around him, but he would follow around to like at late nights, like to continue the conversation or continue an argument or be with me, even though I didn't want to be with him. So there was no like flighting in our house. I mean, I just had to sit and suck it up. So that's when I think the detachment set in, because I had to really just kind of remove any emotional connection I had with him. I could not let the things he was saying bother me or upset me. I just really worked on like taking any sort of free time that we might have had as a family and removing him from it. Oh, well, we already had plans to go to the zoo. Did you want to go? Being real kind of pessimistic about that. And, I just really kind of shut myself off emotionally a long time ago. But this was more of like an actual physical detachment as much as I could, not engaging in any conversations, only being very surface level. When he was yammering on about sports or politics, I would just sit and shake my head, kind of listen. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that must really suck, was kind of my answer to a lot of things.
Yeah, that's detachment as a result rather than a tactic, which is, I think, what detachment really is. I see a lot of people, and I hate to venture to say they get this wrong, but I think they get it wrong. I think that you detach whenever you're in this situation where it's just completely untenable to live in there and be happy and progress in a marriage and grow together. It becomes the result of that situation rather than a tactic that you use to try to manage it, if you will. You know what I mean? And so I think it's really interesting because that was very much your experience too, Paige.
Yeah, I resonated with that so much. It sounded like a very familiar story.
Yeah. Yeah, big time. Okay, so you decide to get sober and then the work really begins. I just want to ask that maybe the both of you, did you think that not drinking was going to fix all the problems in the marriage?
Well, I think you're going to get two different answers if you ask both of us. I was looking for that.
I was hoping for that.
For a long time. I mean, I certainly don't think that anymore. And I got a bit of an awakening, but I went for a long time looking for anything that I could blame for the problems in the marriage so that I wouldn't have to stop. So I would talk, like I said, about Sheri's dysfunctional family growing up and just anything that I could point to. So it was really doing a 180 when I sobered up and said, okay, everything I've been saying for the last 10 years, that's all bullshit. What the actual problem is the alcohol. And so we've got to lay it all on the alcohol. And now that the alcohol's gone, everything's going to be rosy and great. And of course, going through early sobriety, that first year of sobriety when my neurotransmitters weren't firing properly and nothing was bringing me joy, I was still constantly miserable. I mean, that was really, really rough. And luckily, my initial program was doing a ton of reading. I read a lot of memoir, which was really helpful. But I also read enough brain chemistry stuff that I started to understand what was going on for me. But I'm still super selfish. I'm still like, I don't feel good. I this, I that. I don't know what's going on with the relationship. I think sobriety will still fix it. But you knew all along that we had problems that were deeper than alcohol.
Yeah.
Or at least the sobriety wouldn't fix, even if they were caused by alcohol.
Yeah. We had one really rocky weekend when we were out of town celebrating a birthday of mine. And it was just, he was so selfish. He was height of drinking. And I remember sitting on the edge of our bed when we got home. We actually surprised the weekend babysitter because we came home early because we had been fighting almost the entire time. And I remember sitting on the edge of the bed and I said, we have so many more problems than the alcohol. I think we were so immature when we met. So there was communication issues. There was a lack of respect. And I won't say that it was 100% not alcohol's fault. Alcohol played into that and it changed us. But we needed to work on ourselves and then work on the relationship too, which we found out later on was the best plan of action. But I remember there were just so many things. I could just think of a million things all at once that I was so dissatisfied within the relationship. So I decided that I was going to take the easy route, and I was going to hang my hat on Matt's theory that it's just the alcohol. I knew I carried in baggage. I knew I had a lot of heartburn and a lot of resentment, but I'm just going to hang it all on that and say it's just the alcohol. So we kind of played that, trying to make that the only problem in the relationship for a little while. But I was also still in his first year of sobriety. I was still very detached, and he would bring me things to that he read, and he would like say, let's talk about, oh, look what I learned, and we can talk about this. And I was like, I've seen you be sober for 6 months. I've seen you be sober for 9 months. But this time it did feel a little different, but I was still very detached, very hesitant, and very leery that it was going to make any impact at all.
Yeah, that's probably the most common thing that people come to find out, but no one believes it until you see it. That's the thing. You can tell someone it's not just the alcohol, but they have to almost see it for themselves, you know? It's like the curse of experience that we run into, where it's like, I can tell you this all day long, and we've got several episodes about it, but damn it, I'll get an email about once a month. It's like, you were right. I'm like, I know. Like, I didn't make it up. Like, yeah, this is everyone who's talk to someone who's been through it. This is what happens, is that we think it's the substance. Come to find out, there's so much more underlying dysfunction inside of a relationship. And it's hilarious, Matt, she's mentioning, as you're like sending her stuff and all this. I see this a lot. I think I was probably even guilty of this, like sending her YouTube videos about like, this is how relationships work. And it's like, yeah, you idiot. I know. Like, I'm trying to get you here. Like, it's like, it's like a kindergartner comes home, they learn what colors were. And, you know, that's must have been what it felt like at times for her anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. So during the alcoholism, Sheri, I'd like to know about you, your psyche, what you were thinking, what you were feeling, the kind of person you were when you came into the relationship. I mean, and I'm obviously preface all this by saying everyone's human when they enter a relationship. No one's perfect, right? This isn't all just about Matt and how he ruined everything. But how did it change you? How did it change you and your sense of identity being in that situation?
Well, I think from like an aerial view, I feel like the biggest thing that impacted me was I felt like I was just nasty. I was just a nasty, angry human. And I don't remember being that way. I remember standing up for myself, being spunky. We both worked at a bar, and we met working there. And so he could see me like, you know, lip off to somebody, because it was a college bar. Almost all fraternity and sororities like hung out the bar that we were at a Big Ten school. So we were just, you know, always faced with like drunk idiots, always. So he could see me like really kind of banter back and forth with people. And when they would try to like get away without paying or something, you know, for their drink, I would call them on it. So I had no problem like with confrontation or standing up for myself. But I just feel like the anger that started to build in me over the years of being in that like hypersensitive nervous system and walking on eggshells and just wondering every time, is he going to open his mouth? Is there going to be a criticism against me? Is it, you know, and I started to take everything so personally. You know, I mean, that's one of the things you hear often when you are like, you know, in a recovery group, is don't take it personally. It's the alcohol. But I took everything very personal when he would say things like, you're just angry. And I'm like realizing, yeah, I am angry. I'm really angry. I'm really pissed. This is not, you know, it's never what we want it to be. But also I did not want to go down that road. Like I saw a lot of family members and a lot of friends that I grew up with, and even the people that I hung out with in college, I intentionally chose him out of this kind of base group that I had of friends, because I didn't want to go down the road that they were going down. I wanted something different and something better. So it, you know, in hindsight, it was all resentments that were building up. And I just came across as an angry, bitter person. And a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with our oldest child, and she kind of described me as this like fire, like in her mind, like my mom, I was like a monster at times. And I was this fiery red, like just electricity. Zzz, zzz, zzz. But that was the tension, because I was always like constantly worried, like, am I doing something wrong? Am I going to get snapped at about this? Because to keep the facade of us looking like we were a normal family, there had to be the outset of perfection. And Matt is a little bit of I wouldn't say perfectionist, but you like things a certain way. So things had to be a certain way. And that just made me more angry that I wasn't living up to the expectation, and that I had so much put on me. There was so much expected of me, and I couldn't, I didn't have anybody to really turn to. So I did turn to my family, my sister and my mom. And of course it was like a lot of, oh, divorce him. But then we started growing a family and got more entwined. And it was like, how can you get untangled from this? And I didn't want to, because I knew there was a really good person there. And that made me even more angry. So I would say, I don't understand why alcohol has this grip on you. You love us so much. Why don't you stop? Because I just did not make myself educated about what the disease and the addiction was doing to him. So I think the angry part is what really, really makes me the most upset. Because my children's like childhood, I was an angry mom. I didn't yell at them, but they knew if something was wrong, they better snap to attention and fall in line and not argue or bicker with one another, or they knew not to ask for something, you know. So anger just built and built and built.
Yeah, that's so tough. That is so tough. You're right, because it changes everything about you, not just the way you present in a relationship, but everything else too. Like you at your core, and the mother you are, and the friend you are, and the family member you are. It bleeds into everything. And oftentimes you feel like you have lost your sense of identity. Like, who in the hell am I? And I'm just curious, were you at a point where you were ready to leave? Or were you kind of looking at what that would look like before he decided to really tackle this thing?
Yeah, there were a couple of times where even his sister at one point said, come, stay with us. We will figure this out. Like his parents, they were like, we will figure this all out. You know, that because they were a distance enough that he couldn't make it there quickly, you know, by car. And they felt like that kind of space would, you know, and that they were, his side of the family would help, like, really make sure that Matt knew how serious the situation was. So I did have a couple of times where I felt like, oh, I really could leave if I had the support of both sides of the family. Then I would then we'd have a great time, you know, things would go back to normal for a while and things wouldn't get out of hand. So the one thing that I did, like, medically was I went to the doctor, and I didn't necessarily lay it all on the line with my general practitioner. I just said, I have a lot of anxiety and I have a lot of tension. And so she recommended that I start seeing a therapist through our health program, our health insurance. And then I went on anti-anxiety pills. And one of the biggest triggers for me, that was causing me a lot of problems, is anytime we did travel or have vacation, my anxiety would go through the roof, because I knew it was a free for all drinking. Whether we had the children with us or not on our vacation, I could be responsible, or we would be with other family members or friends that could help me with the children, and he could just be drinking and enjoying his free time. So knowing that it all was on me, travel gave me such anxiety. So that's kind of how I prefaced it also. So we talked about using an anti-anxiety, but she did say, you know, that's just a tool. You need to really get some work with a therapist on this. And I don't know, for some reason, I was just scared to death to go and talk to a therapist. And this was probably in like 2015, between 2013 and 2015.
Weren't you afraid of what my reaction would be?
I'm
very pro-therapist now, but at the time I was very anti, and I thought, how stupid is that? You're going to talk about your problems? I mean, I was like Archie Bunker, man. I mean, I was bad attitude about that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So and I was just afraid of what my reaction was.
Yeah. So but that's when I had finally gotten enough nerve to say to you, I need help with my stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember my first therapy appointment, therapist was sick. There was no one to fill in and it was canceled. And I said to you, oh, I don't need you to be home with the kids. And you were like, don't you think that's karma? Don't you think that's the universe telling you don't need to go? You know, so it kind of like made me feel squashed and small. And yeah, I was
good at that.
You were real good at that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of when I started to feel like I needed to do something for myself and continue. And I think that's why that detachment kicked in, just because it was the reaction to what was going on, that I needed that self-protection.
Yeah. And then so going through all that, and I think that sets the stage beautifully for what it's like. And I'm sure that there are listeners all over in their cars right now nodding their heads like, oh yeah, I felt every damn bit of that without a doubt. And then someone decides to tackle the problem. Matt decides, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to recover. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'll move heaven and earth. I don't care. I'm going to get sober. And then he does. And at some point, I guess you said it felt different, right? And then at some point it's like, hey, he's got 10 months or a year or whatever it might be. How involved were you in his recovery? Were you, because you said you were detached, were you just kind of like, dude, do whatever, I'm kind of done with you? Or were you involved with it? Did you cheer him on? Were you supportive? Or were you just like, I don't even give a shit anymore?
More on the I don't give a shit anymore. You do you. You know, if I knew that phrase back then, I would have said, you do you. I didn't want to hear anything you were doing, what you were doing, what you were reading, what you were listening to. I didn't care. You just got to figure you out. That's kind of how I felt. Also, I just didn't want to be disappointed anymore. And during some of those times, especially the first few months, and I wouldn't say we were not arguing, but you definitely have this like a more meek and more humble sort of attitude most of the time. And sometimes I would get really aggravated again. Remember, I was feeling real angry all the time. So I would be like, oh, the whipped puppy. Oh, and I would get like sarcastic a little bit. And he wasn't like arguing back that much during those first few months.
That's different.
But I just remember thinking, I don't want to hear this. And I had already read a couple of books. And one of them that kind of made sense to me talked a lot about the brain chemistry. And so then when he started reading that, I felt like I could share with a friend of mine who was in a little bit of a similar situation. And I don't think at that time he had tried to quit drinking. Her husband had tried to quit drinking, but we talked about that a little bit. And she was working on some nutrition pieces for addiction. And I said, I don't know. And I just got this really weird feeling that somehow this was all going to work out, that he was doing some things that he had never done before. He was acting differently. He wasn't trying to make me his cheerleader, because in the past I felt like he expected me to be his cheerleader and he wasn't. So I just felt like there were a lot of different things. And then when I brought to you what our friend was doing, you showed great interest, and it took you a few months, but then you and she connected and worked together a little bit. So I just felt like the steps he was taking was so much different than before, and actually speaking to someone outside of me about it. And then at your year anniversary, I kind of felt like we were in the clear. And I know for some people that might sound ridiculous, but again, we had already had 10 years of active addiction and working on quitting under our belt at that point. So I'm about ready to lose my voice. So I'll let you say what you did at your 1 year anniversary of quitting drinking.
Yeah. So I sent an email to everyone who I'd ever gotten an email address from. So business, friends, previous career that I was no longer involved in. So how many emails was it?
I think it was like 3,500 or something.
Yeah, I think it was.
You did what?
3,500 or something.
You
emails.
gathered 3,500 emails together?
Well,
how long did that take you?
17 from graduated in 95. So 22 years.
Wow.
And we ran a whole grain bread bakery. So we had an email distribution list for that. So, I was not discriminating who got this email. Customers, old bosses.
Some dude that bought a loaf of bread 4 years prior gets this email.
I don't know who this name is. But so we sent I sent what I called my coming out letter. And that was a real turning point for Sheri. It was a turning point for me as well. I mean, it was kind of like there's no going back now, which was super helpful. I'm a big fan of widening the circle, talking about our stuff, not only because it solidifies the commitment to recovery and sobriety, but it also just creates great connections. When I talk about my stuff, even if my stuff is different than your stuff, it makes you comfortable talking about your stuff to me. And I've developed some just unbelievably sound and empathetic and loving relationships as a result of that initial decision to blast this out. But it really helped Sheri as well, because I had 2 times I had gotten to 6 months and once I had gotten to 9 months. And that's not quite long enough for the brain chemistry to come around. And I was just still miserable. I remember getting to 9 months and saying, this has got to be as good as it's ever going to get. I can't imagine anything getting better. That's how naive I was.
Oh, it gets better.
And if this is as good as it's going to get, this is awful. I'm just going to drink, because drinking was miserable, but it was it was just a different kind of miserable. So making it across that year threshold was huge, not just for me, but Sheri seeing that email go out, she was like, okay, maybe I should take you a little bit serious now. Mm-hmm. And started to, the freeze thawed just ever so slightly.
Yeah. And after that email went out, I had probably like 5 or 6 people reach out to me that was just curious how I was doing, how they had no idea this was going on. And then I had someone say, oh my goodness, like I knew this person. We had interacted at the elementary school for years and said, yeah, I'm living the life that you've been living. And I was just pissed to find out that her husband was an alcoholic. And that's when I think we kind of started talking about the echoes, because I was like, oh my gosh, this person I've known, I haven't been super close with her, but I like cried, I bawled, I was angry for her and her situation, because I just felt like it was so much worse that somebody else had to go through this than me, even though I had been living it for 20 years almost at that point. But I think that really helped me, because having people that were coming out in support of me and, conversing with Matt, reaching out to Matt, making sure he was okay, making sure the family was okay. And then again, opening up and sharing all the stories of people that they had in their lives, whether it was their daughter or their brother or their parents or their husband and wife that were alcoholics or had some other form of addiction, just kind of made us feel like things were on a different track now.
Did you ever go to Al-Anon?
I did not.
So you recovered on your own. And Matt, you didn't use 12 steps either to get sober. You carved your own path. Yeah,
that's right. My opinion has changed dramatically from my early days. I was pretty anti 12 steps originally, pretty anti AA for a variety of reasons. Didn't like the dogma. I was a very spiritual person, but I didn't like the kind of conflict about the higher power that existed. And the more I learned about brain chemistry, the more I felt like that was really important. And it isn't part of AA necessarily. It isn't part of the big book. And so I like I said, I was pretty anti-AA originally. Now, my opinion has changed dramatically. I think, the more tools that we can throw at the recovery community, the better. Some people might really relate to my path, and that's great, but others won't. Some people are going to do great in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and they're going to do great in the 12 steps, and others won't. And I think, acknowledging that and acknowledging that that there needs to be many, many different paths to long-term and sustained recovery, I think is really, really important. So rather than throw stones from one recovery plan to another, I just embrace them all and say, hey, and we have people all the time that try our Shout sobriety program and, and maybe it's not a good fit for them. Much like I'm sure what you guys would say, don't give up. There's something out there.
Yeah, try something.
If this wasn't it, something else will work for you.
Absolutely.
There's a path for everybody. And the beautiful thing for the alcoholic or anyone suffering from addiction directly firsthand is there really has been an explosion of options out there for help, well beyond the 12 steps. It's the area that we're really focused in, and I know you two are as well, the support for the partners and the loved ones. That's still an area where a lot more support is needed. And so that's where we kind of gravitate in that direction, because there's a bigger void there. There are fewer programs out there. So I know you didn't do Al-Anon, but
so I did. It was
about 3 years in when you went to therapy?
Yeah. So I had a personal therapist that also had his own addiction, and his ex-wife had her addiction. They were both alcoholics and drug users. So I had him helping me from both sides of it. So I really started to develop a lot more empathy for what Matt had been going through and what he had suffered from, because I was hearing what it's like from someone who was an addict. And I was getting a lot of help through, and we also did some of the 12 kind of steps through, like, he was also a pastor, but we did some Celebrate Recovery stuff. So I did like bits and pieces of things that he thought would really be a bigger component from what I needed from how I grew up and dealing with some of those generational traumas and moving forward and moving past and that mother's guilt. So we kind of condensed a lot of things in with my therapy work, instead of kind of following one certain path for, recovery through Al-Anon. So we did.
I wonder if Paige would relate to this. You were really mad when you decided you needed to go to therapy. Yeah. You're like, I didn't screw any of this up. What do I got to go do work for?
Well, yeah. Because I had finally said, fine, it's the alcohol. And I was real lazy, and I didn't want to like give up who I was. I mean, even though I had gotten angry, I had also become very comfortable with being a little angry there. And yeah, then to think, oh, now I have to spend money on therapy, and I have to do extra stuff, and I have to dig into my own shit. That's going to suck. And I don't want to do that, because it was hard. Those first couple months sessions, they were hard sessions, and I did not want to go there.
Yeah, I was pissed when Matt went to treatment and they told me that I needed to work on myself. I was like, okay, what are you talking about? But it came out years later, obviously, within my mental health, and I went to therapy, but I went to a trauma specialist. So I dealt with basically the trauma that I dealt with him and other situations. So it wasn't addiction related. It was more of just like the betrayal, the lies, the things that I had gone through with my most intimate partner, basically. So,
and you know what's interesting to me, and we can talk about this for a second, is I don't really think that treatment centers even know what the hell to do with spouses and partners. I don't. I've been around them forever, and I see when people get in there and they'll talk to spouses and partners, and they'll send them to like Al-Anon. And listen, Al-Anon as a community it's a beautiful thing. They feel heard for the first time. They get validation for the first time and probably forever. And they're around other people who've gone through the same thing. But it's not so clear what we're trying to accomplish all the time, because not everyone needs to leave a relationship, but some do. But they don't just out and say that, So it's rather complex. Like, I'm curious, what is your thesis behind what spouses are actually recovering from? And what's the course of action for recovery for a spouse?
Well, it's definitely trauma. I mean, anyone who downplays what it's like to live with an addict or an alcoholic, and I think, generally speaking, the outside world does. When somebody gets sober, the question is, how's Matt doing? Right. And the question is never, how's Sheri doing? And I think that's a tragedy. I think what the partners that we work with and that we get to know, they have been in nervous system activation for literally years. Something that's supposed to be there for you in case you encounter a bear on a hiking trail. It's supposed to be a couple of times a year that kicks in, and you're living in it. Like, that is, it not only is nervous system activation not a healthy state to live in, but it also starts to manifest in physical ways. We meet people with shoulder pain and back pain and hives and just all kinds of different ailments that come from that. And so we are often the first people that acknowledge that what they've been through is trauma. It's capital T trauma. It's not to be messed with, and it's something that needs some serious work. And so that kind of validation and reassurance is super helpful. Big part of what we believe the partners need is, Sheri talked about her anger, right? The resentment processing. Resentment processing is something to spend a lot of time on. If you can do resentment processing with your partner, that's great. One of the things that we've learned is that's not usually very effective until the partner, the drinker, the former drinker, gets to the point where they can rehash situations from the past without it re-traumatizing them. So there's like a waiting period there, right? Because early on, if Sheri wanted to bring up something from the past, I'd say, Sheri, whoa, I quit drinking. Like, that's in the past. We don't need to go there. That's not me anymore. But it wouldn't go away, right? Trauma doesn't just go away. You have to work it out. And so one of the things that we've learned, not only through our own experience, but with working with other people, is they have to have a safe forum to work that out and to go into the details. And my role as the partner was just to acknowledge Sheri's experience and validate it, not to correct her, not to tell her my memory's different, not to tell her, oh, you're making a big deal out of nothing, just to acknowledge that, wow, your experience was different than mine, and that's got to be really hard, and to show a lot of empathy. And so if the partner can do that with, if the two partners can do that together, that's great. But so often, either the drinker doesn't stop drinking or the drinker just can't go there. They just can't have that conversation, or the couple's parted company. And so one of the things that we try to do in our Echoes of Recovery group is to help people to work through that resentment processing piece through writing prompts that we do and other discussion sessions, and just give people a forum for that. So the nervous system regulation and resentment processing, I mean, those are the two biggest chunks early on. And then, it's just like self-esteem growth is so important for me in my long-term recovery and just my growth as a human, not just staying sober, but continuing to learn and be a better father and a better husband and all of that. The self-esteem rebuilding is huge for the partners because they've been gaslit for years and decades. And they've been told that they're not remembering it right. And they've been darvoed, right? Where Sheri might come to me with a complaint and I'm just going to turn it on her and tell her it's all her fault. And just after years of that kind of manipulation, whether it's intentional or not, it really messes with people.
And I think
that self-esteem rebuilding is so important.
Yeah. And along those lines is that shame piece. There's a lot of women and men in our Echoes of Recovery group that are what one would say like, oh, a very, professional person with a really high paying career that took a lot of education to get there and a lot of, grit to get there. And then they're married to an alcoholic. And so there's this like shame component, like, how could I have let that happen? Or how did I not see? Or so we kind of like help work through that with them on that and acknowledge that, there are so many alcoholics and addicts out there
everywhere.
And that, they're so good at hiding it. I mean, I know, Matt, when we interviewed you, like the things that you were telling Matt and I about your addiction and how you were so good at hiding it for so many years, like you just don't understand how perfect these people are with hiding it. So I think that's one of the pieces too that I feel like is really important, because I felt like when he wrote the coming out letter and I had people come and talk to me, people that he had coached their kids soccer, and and she came to me and I hadn't seen her in 6 years, and we went on a walk and she was telling me and she was kind of reminding me, there is nothing to be shame-filled about. I hope you don't feel embarrassed by this. So that's when I think that for me, talking about it more openly is to kind of help get the shame piece out of it and to get rid of the stigma there that goes along with that, and help people move along about sharing their experiences with this.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my questions is how you feel about being pulled into these conversations when you've been out of it for so long. Because for me personally, sometimes it's really difficult. I mean, I've been out of it for 12 plus years now. And I was just wondering how it makes you feel when you have to be pulled into these conversations.
Well, sometimes it's really hard to kind of tap back into those emotions and kind of walk with that person. So the first thing I try to do when I am pulled into those conversations is just to let them talk and have the space and have a good listening ear. And I am a bit of a crier, so I will hear their story. And even though I'm not having any emotions from my past, I feel so bad for them. I'll start to cry. And then it kind of makes me remember, oh shit, I went through this. I know how this person is feeling. And I try really hard not to like give out any advice, just say, oh, I completely understand. But sometimes it is very taxing, because I do want to move forward. I want to continue to be growing and learning and appreciating the life we have now. So sometimes it is very hard, especially when I hear a story where you had mentioned, Matt, sometimes there are times when that person needs to go because the situation is so bad. But I can't say that. And I want to help them so bad, but I can't say that.
Yeah.
And that's an emotional drain on me.
It's always been rather interesting to me that, like, let's just say in the context of the 12 steps, I think with the exception of overeating and technically sex and then Al-Anon, every other 12 step aims to achieve to remove this substance from your life. But with Al-Anon, like, that's not, they don't really say that's the goal, is to remove the dysfunction from your life. Like, in some ways they teach you how to live inside the dysfunction. And it's always been kind of interesting to me that was the goal seems so unclear, because you're right. Like, as another couple that works in this, it's not our job to tell people to leave. It's our job to empower people, to build them up and to rebuild their self-esteem and their nervous systems and everything else, and get them back on the track where they can learn to make decisions for themselves and what's best for them. But it is like taxing, coming in weekly talking about stuff that's like, that hasn't been part of our lives in so long. And then it's almost like re-traumatization through discussion or through writing or through research or anything else. It's like, it almost, in some ways, I think for Matt, and correct me if I'm wrong, like in some ways it's beneficial to me to talk about what I did and the person that I was, because it's a stark reminder that I could become that person if I choose to right now. But I think for a spouse, it's gotta be different, right? It's got to be different because it's secondhand trauma. It was at our hands, right? So revisiting that, like Paige has told me before, like it's shit going back and to revisit that stuff week in and week out sometimes.
Yeah, but I think I had a grad school professor. It was a sexual trauma class, and she said, if you can do this work, you need to, because a lot of people can't. And that just sentiment echoes in my head all the time when we meet somebody new and they're sharing a story that's so similar, and it's something we've heard 100 times, right? But you kind of think about the life cycle of the partner. Here are all the things you're going to go through, and you try to kind of figure out, where are they on the continuum? Okay, they're right here. They're exploring real natural detachment. They're not just doing it because they read it out of a book. They've really hit the end of the line. And then they'll share, just to put something more concrete to this, they'll talk about all the things they're doing with boundaries and detachment, but then they'll talk about pouring out all the whiskey they found and hiding the car keys. And you're like, okay,
hang on.
Like, you get it and you're moving in the right direction, but you're not there yet. But that they have to go through it all themselves. And I look at it like, if we can just shorten that process for people just a little bit, just with encouraging nudges in one direction or the other. One of the really sad things that we've experienced in our Echoes of Recovery group, we've had 9 of the women in the group have lost their partners. They've died, 2 suicides and 9 medical complications directly related to alcohol. And, having gone through that, like it really teaches you. I mean, we're peer support. We are not professional therapists, first of all. We're not psychologists. It's not our job to tell people stay or go, because I would never be able to handle it. If I told somebody to leave, for instance, and then their partner died of an overdose because they were so distraught because the person left, I couldn't handle the guilt. So, we talk about detachment and how, in our opinion, that's the only solution, not only for the partner, for the non-drinking partner, but it's also the only solution for the drinker. This is all about independent growth. And so, like in our case, when Sheri detached, and that was impetus for me to get sober, as often as we see that, we also see the person double down, drink more, and spiral. but there's no third option. It's like detachment and it goes well, detachment and it goes well for the non-drinker, but it goes badly for the drinker. But there's not, and your other option is this, and this works sometimes. There just isn't. And so we try to guide, we try to give experience, we try to encourage, without saying, thou shalt, because I hate to ever give advice and then have that go bad and then have to live with the consequences. So I guess that's a way that I continue to be selfish. I just don't want to live with that kind of, guilt.
No, and you're absolutely right. People have to learn on their own terms in their own time, or else it doesn't do any good effect to them. You could tell them exactly how the story ends, and it doesn't matter unless they learn it for themselves. I've been reading this Douglas Robertson, I think is the guy's name, book called Think Like Socrates. And there's this quote. He says, following someone else's moral or psychological guidelines is like following the directions to get through a forest. It only works until you get lost again.
Yeah.
We have to learn for ourselves. That's the only way it works. That's the only way it works. And so you're right. Like, you can even see it. And it's like, I can see where you're at. And you just try to encourage them to that point. But you're right. You can't tell someone how the story ends. You have to watch that movie all the way to the end yourself. It will never make sense or have any meaning in your life if someone else tells you, right?
Right.
Yeah. But it can be tricky going back.
It depends on, there's so many factors. Yeah. We say it all the time. It's the same story over and over. It's a progressive disease. This is how it works. But, you just never know when the drinker, for instance, is going to hit that aha moment and say, for this variety of pain-filled factors, I'm done. And for some people that day comes, and for some it doesn't. So the actions taken by the non-drinking partner, you don't know how the story is going to end. You just really don't. And so pretend, we can live our lives and be an example. But it doesn't mean that the partner did something wrong if the drinker doubles down and spirals. Right. They just don't have that much control of the situation.
Yeah. I think that's probably people's biggest fear too, right? It's if I do make a decision to protect myself, and I will say, I do double down, and I have straight up told people to leave if there's physical abuse. I say, get the fuck out of that house. Get out of that house. Yeah. Get to safety. Get away from that person as fast as you can. Yeah. Get your children to safety.
Find resources to help you.
I want to apologize for it. It's what we have insurance for. That's the way I see it anyway. But yeah, if someone's in danger. Otherwise, though, like, you're right. Anything can happen. And the fact of the matter is, even if you did tell them to go, they're not going to do anything until their mind is made up for their own reasoning, not mine or yours or anyone else's. It's got to be their idea. So I wanted to shift a little bit, kind of, now we've got some context for what addiction and both of your recoveries have kind of looked like, but what did rebuilding look like? Like the first year, I think ours is probably resembles a lot like yours. It's like you kind of think you got away with everything. It's like, it's a Band-Aid. It's like, oh, look, we're better, right? We're good. And you kind of fist bump. We're like, yeah, we're good, right? But you're not good. What did rebuilding look like? And what were the first signs in your relationship that shit wasn't exactly right after sobriety?
I want to say, like, one of the big aha moments was that spring of 2020. And you had been sober for what, 2.5 years, 3 years at that point?
3 years, yeah.
Yeah. And we were, all of us as a family, we're cleaning up the front yard and the backyard for the spring. And I had not done any recovery work at that point. I had not. That's when I started seeing my therapist.
Pre-therapist.
I lost my shit over whether it was going to be a paper bag that we were putting the leaves in, or if it was going to be Matt's choice of the plastic bag, which is wrong. But I lost it. I mean, lost it. And I was like, that's it. I am not well. And that's when I started therapy. Because that was like the moment when I realized I was still so angry and mad and frustrated, and I didn't want him to tell me what to do about cleaning up the yard. I realized I had no respect for him because he had lost it for me. So, and even though we hadn't really been arguing, it was just still inside me, and it was just bubbling over.
I think that's a really important point you make. When we get sober and we do this work, and we are rightfully proud of the work that we've done and proud of putting down some time in sobriety. And it's important that we build our own self-esteem and start to feel good about ourselves. That's the best, in my opinion, the best form of relapse prevention is self-esteem. but you feel good about yourself. I had no idea how little respect Sheri had for me. We hadn't done the resentment processing yet. She hadn't done her own therapy. And, I think I'm a pretty solid guy over here. I'm kind of a catch, I'm worth being proud of. Look at all this great work I've done in recovery. So it was a huge eye-opening experience to realize, yes, I knew Sheri still loved me, but she didn't like me. And I would argue that when it comes to recovering a relationship from addiction or any trauma, like is probably more important than love. And it was hugely eye-opening when she blew up about the plastic bag, paper bag, and just a variety of things that followed.
Well, because we had also been trying to work on the relationship, but I didn't share. I was shut off. And I realized I didn't even know if he would have said, "What do you want for dinner?" "I'm going to cook." I wouldn't have known what to tell him. I had no idea who I was.
You were
I was so lost.
Stuffer downer.
I was a stuffer downer. I shared nothing with him because I had been so closed off for years, but I couldn't give him an honest answer. I didn't even know myself. And so here we are trying to work on this marriage now when I didn't even know who I was anymore. And I know that sounds so silly, but I could not say yes or no. I could not about a particular movie. I'd be like, "I don't know. What do you want to do?" And I was like, wow, I'm not even in here anymore. And I can't work on a relationship. I can't work on this with you because I got to figure out who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So that was...
Besides Sheri going to therapy and starting her own work, which was huge, the other piece that we eventually figured out, I mean, we actually did it all along, but we didn't do it particularly effectively, was we started scheduling these weekly meetings with each other. It's on the calendar. We're going to respect each other's time, just like you would a business meeting or anything else. And they were weekly, and they were for the purpose of resentment process. We actually still do this to this day. Sheri gets to share something that's bothering her, and I'm doing my best to be a good listener, show empathy, respect her experience, and not tell her why she's wrong, not try to fix it, just be a good listener. And she, in turn, does the same thing for me. I can share something that I feel resentful about or just something that's bothering me, and she's a good listener and shares empathy for my experience. And it was a huge turning point because it allowed Sheri to start to work on all this pent up anger. So besides the individual therapy she was doing, that was our initial foray into relationship work. And, it was just vital, absolutely vital.
Mm-hmm.
Did you two stumble across that process through literature, or was it some just common sense thing? We ought to really discuss this stuff on a regular basis.
It actually started, I played in an over 30-year-old men's indoor soccer league on Thursday nights. And one of my English teammates, really funny guy, he talked about doing this with his girlfriend. And I came home, this is when I was still drinking, and I came home and I said, "Sheri, this is a great idea. We'll do this weekly meeting thing." And so we literally did this for years. And it was just like beating your head against the wall. We were getting nowhere. We would correct each other. We would start out as us sharing something that was bothering us. Pretty soon, we're like two cats on the porch just clawing at each other. I mean, it was awful. So we did it wrong for a long time before we finally figured out how to do it right.
We still kept doing it.
But we kept doing it. And it was just a old soccer buddy of mine that originally put the idea in our head.
Yeah.
So going through that, this is kind of interesting to me. Going through that process and early on recovery, the first, let's say 90 days, Matt, did you have a good idea of what she was even resentful about? And then on the flip side of that, did you have a seat at the table immediately to discuss your resentments, or was it you don't get to say shit? You sit here and listen to Sheri for an hour and you get to go to bed. Is that how it worked, or was it Did you feel like you had more to apologize for than you had to bitch about?
Yes. I'm glad you used the word apology, because I think that's a really important part of this. That's tricky. What we see is that different relationships go different ways as it relates to apologies in the moment. I was a big apologizer, right? So I'd go a couple weeks and everything be fine, and then I'd have a big weekend and I'd overdrink and I'd cause chaos and I'd say stupid things and I'd stay out too late and I'd call names and I'd do all the stuff. And originally I'd blame that on Sheri. And then after, maybe the next day I'd start to come to and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. And I would start apologizing. So Sheri had been through these cycles of massive apologizing for me that were followed by repeated bad behavior. So she was done hearing me apologize. The apologies were empty and awful. We do meet a lot of couples where the Sheri in the relationship never got apologies along the way, and they are desperate for the apology at that point because they've never heard it. But I think the majority of the cases that we know are more like us, where these empty apologies have just been painful. So the resentment processing, it was really important for me to say as little as possible and just acknowledge and nod, and rather than say I'm sorry, say, wow, that must have been hard. Holy cow, I didn't realize that was what was going on from your perspective. I feel like Sheri did make room for me to bring resentments. It was just a huge learning period for me, Matt.
Right. No, I'm right.
I felt like I had less resentment and more. I mean, we were probably 3 years into my sobriety and our recovery before I realized how tenuous my relationship was, when I really started to realize she doesn't like me. She loves me and we have kids together and we're both names are on the mortgage, and it'd be a real pain in the ass for her to leave me, but she's barely here. And so I got real good at resentment processing real fast. And I don't remember, do you? I don't remember. I mean, I know you gave me room to say my piece, but I don't remember being about that so much.
Yeah. I'll just cut to the chase. Most of the time, your conversations at that point were all related about sex and the lack of enthusiasm on my part. That's when I finally said, I don't even like you. Like, I had to be real clear about that. I love you so much, but I don't like you. I have like little respect for you. I know you've accomplished this sobriety. You did and let's just remind everyone, early sobriety is very selfish on the addict's part. Yep. There's a lot of attention. So I was still second fiddle to the addiction. So I was, for the first year and a half, 2 years even, I felt like we were still all worried about him. I think during the therapy process that I went through, it was kind of helped me to share with my therapist what was going on. And then I realized when we were doing these resentment processes, what I needed to do was I needed to have him help carry the burden of the memories. That maybe he doesn't know what happened, but this is my my perspective of what happened on these big traumatic events. So I kind of started sharing it like that. And I think that's one of the reasons Matt said he didn't say much, because he didn't really have a memory for those. And he also, when I think I said, I just need to share this burden with you because I'm carrying all this. And that actually is a big resentment, having those memories locked in me and causing trauma. So to release those, I think, and seeing the way he reacted and responded, or the lack of response, helped a lot. And I even was very clear, I don't need an apology for this because I've heard enough apologies to last a lifetime. And I don't even know if I believe any of your apologies. So I think we got over that hump pretty quickly. And then I guess your conversations during our resentment processing were about sex. Sex has always been very important to Matt in the relationship. And we continued to have sex during the addiction, but it wasn't satisfying. He was feeling that I was checked out while we were doing it. So he was trying real hard to build a relationship that he didn't even know really had no foundation. So that was mostly what his conversations were about. Then we could start sharing. So about in year 3.5, we started really kind of working on that piece, because then I felt like, okay, he knows where I'm at in the relationship. He knows that there's a lot more foundation that needs to be built before we can jump into having a satisfying sex life.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most common thing that I hear from anyone I've ever worked with. It's like, yeah, she doesn't want to have sex with me. I'm like, yeah, dude, you've been running around doing God knows what for the past 7 years. It's been a week. Give it a rest, But it's like, no, we need to talk about sex. So let's get into sex, and let's get into the role that sex does play in a relationship and the rebuilding in your own intimacy. And you've kind of hinted at it there, Sheri and Matt as well, that early on, there was no emotional connection that would give sex any real meaning between the two of you, although you still wanted it. So Matt, I've listened to your show, and you call yourself, I think you put it as a high libido, right? High libido.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, high libido. So sex has always been important to you, and I think for a lot of guys can relate to that. But for women, sex is it's so much more than just libido. It's about the connection that you make with somebody. It's about the intimacy, the feeling safe with somebody. And when there's not a congruence of those two things, you don't have any solution really, And so, how did you two solve that problem?
Oof. How we got to the solution, it was a long and winding road.
Yes. We did it all wrong to begin with. Let's just say that.
Everything up.
We did try to do it a lot, take a big break from it. He realized, she could be fine going without it forever. Yeah. That's not working. Longing doesn't make the heart grow fonder, so that's not doing it. I think
two of the big kind of awakenings for us eventually. One is that it's really, really important in a relationship to acknowledge that no one is sexually broken. While our situation is the most common, where the man has the higher sex drive than the woman, especially after childbirth, there are hormonal and biological things that change for women after childbirth, and often it just brings the sex drive down to basically nil, or at least tapers it off quite a bit. But there are also cases where the woman has the higher sex drive than the man. So it can go, any direction. But the fact that there is sexual desire discrepancy where the sex drives are not the same, that is universal. It is super, super rare. I've actually never met a couple where they both are on exactly the same page as far as libido is concerned. So assuming you've got one person with higher sex drive and one person with lower, it's really, really important that we acknowledge that nobody is sexually broken. And so what that manifests like in a relationship is, for so many years, Sheri thought I was just a horny little teenager running around, and all I could, I just thought with my crotch all the time, and it's the only thing I cared about. And I thought she was a selfish prude who had turned her back on her wedding vows, and, wasn't fulfilling her end of the relationship responsibility. Those are like just toxic belief systems to have. And so we had to come to a really powerful and healthful and empathetic understanding that I'm not broken and neither is she. Low sex drive, high sex drive, these are normal conditions, normal biological and neurological conditions for people to experience, and they change over time in a relationship. And the very worst thing we can do is be mad at each other because we aren't aligned. You're just not going to be aligned, and that's okay. So that was a huge kind of first step. The other big piece that we had to understand, that we share with a lot of people, is that obligatory, you're my wife, so you have to, sex is, it's toxic. It does all kinds of damage to relationships, and it's not the way to go. So the first thing to do, once you've acknowledged those two kind of ground rules, is to really work on first emotional safety and then emotional intimacy, because there's usually at least one partner for whom emotional safety, and then that can build toward emotional intimacy. That is really the key that unlocks the potential for physical and sexual intimacy. I had it all wrong for so long. Like, I would say, hey, Sheri, let's set the mood right. Let's play a little music. Let's, get the lighting right. Everything will be perfect. And then once you get into it, that the physical side of it will kick in, and you just love me so much more, and you'll feel so much closer to me. And I just had it backward. I just had it wrong. The physical intimacy, and Sheri, I think you'll acknowledge that our sexual relationship is better than it's ever been by like a long shot, but it has to build from the emotional intimacy first. I can compartmentalize. I can, have a bad day, get in an argument with Sheri, jump into bed, and I'm still ready to go. And that does not work for her at all. The emotional safety piece and the emotional intimacy piece, it has to come first in order for it to be meaningful.
Yeah,
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you okay with everything I said?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a lot of nodding.
And I know, Paige, you were shaking your head and you said the emotional safety piece of it. That I didn't realize that was holding me back. Also, we had to educate ourselves. We had to educate ourselves on our own bodies. We are in our 50s. how did we not know any of this? Like some of this stuff is just things that you don't even like learn in, life or in sex ed or in health class.
K through 12 sex ed is very penis centric. There's not a lot of clitoris, education going on.
Yeah.
And there should be.
Yeah. So we like really kind of educated ourselves with some books and some podcasts and some readings just to kind of like also kind of make it not feel like it's dirty, because I kind of felt like it was dirty when I wasn't emotionally connected with Matt and having sex, and I was feeling very much used and like I was like, not worthy of the kind of feelings and the love that should be there when you're in a marriage and a long-term relationship. So I think that was part of it too, was the education piece on the book that we read.
Yeah, a great book called Come As You Are.
Is it spelled like I think it
by
is?
Dr. Emily Nagoski. She's one of my heroes.
Yeah.
Can't recommend that book enough.
Yeah. So we kind of worked through some of those pieces and then just had a lot of long, hard conversations and really embarrassing conversations.
Long and hard.
Oh, funny. See, he is a teenager.
I was going to ask how is the title of that book spelled?
It's COME.
Oh,
but there is a picture. It's got a zipper and it looks like a vagina on the front. We got a copy right here.
Well, it's right
Here's
next
our book.
to you. Of course
we have kids in the house, so Sheri put contact paper over the cover of the book so the kids wouldn't see it. Sorry.
That's epic. That's epic. So
yeah,
I think what you two identified is what, a lot of couples with some maturity and some real knowledge about each other and about the way that relationships work and what sex really works is it's not only do I think it's really not, I'm not even sure if people should be getting together if there's not some kind of emotional intimacy there in a marriage, especially after addiction. But this seems to be where people fight the most. I see this all the time in our community. It's like, all he cares about is sex. All he cares about is sex. Does he not know how badly he's hurt me? What is your way to communicate that to someone who's been an alcohol or drug abuser? How do you communicate the message without losing your mind?
I think the biggest thing is differentiating between emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy and really breaking those into two separate categories. And it's really, really important for the people on my side of the fence, the people with the higher sex drive, the people for whom sexual intimacy is very satisfying and something that I'm in pursuit of, I'm hopeful for. Rather than me look at it like, oh, I deserve this, and oh, I'm in this marital relationship and it's part of the deal. I need to go out and earn it. And the way that I go out and earn it is by creating an emotionally safe environment and then investing the time to build the emotional intimacy that will eventually lead Sheri to, like, her libido is never going to get to mine. And that's not the point, but we can get to the point where she values and respects me enough that she thinks that the thing that I need and want is, I've earned it. It's a respectable thing to pursue sex in a relationship. But first, I used to think, oh, she needs emotional intimacy, I need physical intimacy, whatever, we're different. I didn't understand, no, there's a very distinct and important order that this needs to go in. And even before the emotional intimacy piece, the emotional safety piece, this is one of the first things we try to help people understand. Emotional safety is not just that I don't drink and that I don't call her names and that I don't yell at her. It's the environment I create in the house. If I've got cable news on and I'm screaming at the TV screen every evening while the kids are trying to do their homework and, Sheri's doing her thing, or if I have a bad day at work and I come home and I rant and rave about the people I'm dealing with at work, I'm just taking the anxiety level in the house and I'm raising it up. And so the house isn't emotionally safe. Even if I'm not yelling at her and I'm not yelling at the kids, I'm just creating this tension that is not conducive to intimacy of any kind. And so the better I can do to create a safe environment, emotionally safe environment, the more likely it is that we can build emotional intimacy that will eventually lead to sexual intimacy. Esther Perel, she's a Belgian-American psychotherapist. She's one of my heroes. And she says that foreplay starts at the end of the last orgasm. And that sticks in my head. it's really great because I'm a compartmentalizer, right? Like I said, I can have bad thing happen, bad thing happen. I'm ready for sex. And that doesn't work for Sheri. Like, it needs to be a calm, peaceful, happy, healthful environment all the time in order for her to occasionally be interested in sex. And so just creating that environment and keeping it safe is super important.
And I feel like for my side of the road too, I had to, well, we did a lot of things wrong, but I think even if you are on the right track, it's going to take a long time to get to that, because I needed to have a lot more safe and happy memories to kind of replace that. I needed to have a really bad day and be able to come home and tell Matt something like, oh my gosh, I just backed into somebody at the parking lot at the grocery store, and not see him flip out. I need to have a bad experience with like one of our teenagers and not have him jump in and try to fix the situation or yell at the teenager and let me try to work it out with the teenager, you know? So I had to like have a lot of years of building the relationship back. And actually, I wouldn't even say rebuilding the relationship back. Like, we had to start a new relationship because we were different people after the sobriety took hold. So we had to build a relationship that included the respect, included the safe environment, included that I could say things to him where I wasn't going to have to worry about his reaction, you know, blaming me for something that happen. And maybe, yes, I was responsible for it. Like backing into the car because I wasn't paying attention to the backup camera or whatever, but not making it my fault, not coming down on me and criticizing and belittling me.
Things that aren't your fault. Like, I took, one of our kids to the orthodontist and they need braces. It's going to be $5,000. What? Oh, you got to be kidding. I've had to learn that's not a healthful reaction. Even though I'm not blaming her wigging out on some news that she brought to me, that is a no-no.
I mean, after years of living in that state of like walking around on eggshells, it can't happen for me anymore. And I don't
think it should happen in any I think this is don't get me started. I think we're at a societal turning point in relationships between men and women. And I think men need to understand their roles are different now than they've been in the past. And we just have to, if we are blessed to have someone in our life that loves us and trusts us, we need to maintain that trust. And there's so many ways to break it. And it needs to be priority one to keep it solid, because I think that's one of the biggest things that's negatively impacting relationships today is just like, I try to treat it like we're constantly dating, like I'm trying to win her over. And part of what helps me with that is we did have to come back from the edge, right? We came back from a point where she did not like me and she had a foot out the door. And so it's a lot easier for me to stay in that spot than maybe it is for others. But I think it's just super important to have a level of respect within the relation. I mean, this is the most important person in my life, so I'm going to treat her that way. And I think in many, many cases, that isn't what happens. We start to take each other for granted and treat each other less than. And I think that's to our considerable, detriment.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. I think there's so much truth to all of that. I mean, I think that the role that the men have today that they didn't have 40, 50 years ago, tremendously different. And like, I've always, very much like you put it, I've always said, like, you've got to earn your dinner. I don't know why you think you don't have to. Like, at what point did you stop pursuing your spouse? It doesn't make any sense to me that you think that this just comes with the territory, especially after everything that you've done and the type of environment you've created. Like, you're kidding me, right? But they're not. They'll look you dead in the eyes and be like, no, this has to happen. That's just crazy to me. It's crazy to me, and I'd love to know that there's another guy out there that agrees. And it doesn't mean you're any less masculine because you care about the emotional safety of your best friend.
Yeah.
It's insane to me. Insane.
It's a hard place for people to go. I mean, as men, we're not raised in emotionally safe environments. We're raised in environments where teasing is the only acceptable emotion, right? Making fun of each other. And, that's just got to change. We've got to be more emotionally rounded. If, we're in a society today where women don't get married because they need the financial security of marriage. They get married for choice. And if we don't give them very many good choices, then there's no reason for them to marry us. So much has to change. One of my pet peeves, one of the things I hate the most is when we meet people and they talk about, those traditional wedding vows, and they talk about that, their love for their partner is unconditional. I think marriage is the most conditioned relationship that there is. I mean, we chose each other. There were the attributes that Sheri had that I picked, and she picked attributes about me. The love we have for our kids is unconditional. The love we have for each other is very, very much conditioned. And as an active alcoholic, I wasn't living up to my end of the conditions. Right. And so she had every right to take the action she did to protect herself and protect our kids.
And I think that level of accountability is what makes relationships like the one that you two have and the one that we have possible. I really do. I don't think it can happen any other way. So many people find it difficult because they don't know how to separate the shame from the action, right? It's like, if I admit to these things, and that means that's who I am, which isn't true. We just don't have a guilt filter. We need to develop a guilt filter. You can feel bad for the things that you've done without saying these things are who I am. But it takes a little while to get to that point, but it is possible. And I think that for any listeners, what you're hearing, it's a conversation between two mature adults who have worked through this stuff. And this is possible for every single person out there. This is not an anomaly. This isn't something that's incredibly rare. This is something that's, well, I would say rare, but it's not because it's just like, something that happens rarely in the cosmos. This is something that two people work toward, and this is what you get. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is a beautiful thing. And can't thank you, two of you, for coming on and giving people a taste of what marriage can look like after this thing and how close you can actually get. You two are having conversations about, deep conversations, sounds like, about your sex life when you didn't even like him, 6-7 years ago. You didn't want to be in the same room with this guy. Now look at the two of you reading the Kama Sutra, whatever that book was. What was the book called again? Come as you are. Right? Come as you are.
Come as you are.
Come as you are.
Emily Nagoski, great book.
Yeah, that's how far things can get. And that's how beautiful things can get when there is at first validation, because validation, in my opinion, is the first step in healing. It's when we feel heard, and you've certainly given her that space. And then I think that there was a period of time where it was like, in the beginning, it was all about me. Like Sheri, you mentioned, the first year of addiction or recovery is very, very selfish. And I stand by, it has to be. I didn't know another way to do it. I had to double down on those processes and everything else. I didn't have the capacity for much anything else. I was rewiring my mind. I wasn't able to be a lot of things, and I regret that mightily, but I don't know if it can be another way. I'd like to think there is, but I just haven't seen it happen yet. But there's something beautiful that can happen after that point when we become present again and we start to rebuild our relationship. And then it's like, wow, we have a normal marriage like everyone else. It's amazing. It's amazing. But I've always said, give me couples that have fought back from the edge. Give me couples that have gone through hell and back, because those are the ones that really get it. They really know each other. And I count the both of you amongst that group. I can't not thank you enough for coming on here. Where can people go to find out more about you, your courses, everything that you have to offer?
So we published a book in 2020 called Sober Evolution, Evolve into Sobriety and Recover Your Alcoholic Marriage. That's a great way just to hear our full story. The book is divided into 3 parts. The first is my active addiction. Then there's a section about my sobriety and recovery. But then I think the thing that's unique in this book and the thing that people really relate to is the third section is about recovering the relationship. And that's what makes it different from other books out there on the similar topics. And then we hope people will check out our podcast, the Untoxicated Podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts. We actually I don't know when this episode will come out for you, but we had an episode that came out on January 13th called Sex Talk with Nikki. So if you like the fact that we're willing to go there as it relates to emotional and physical intimacy, we have a great guest on who has had a similar but different experience in her marriage, and she just laid it all out there and talked about some really relatable stuff. So we hope you'll check out the Untoxicated Podcast.
Yeah, please do. If you guys have not listened, check out the podcast. Sex is a topic they specialize in. That is sort of, is it fair to say that's your niche within the niche within the niche?
Yeah, I just finished a master's in sexual health. So
well, there you
go. And we've got 2 research projects about intimacy underway. So it's become a bit of an academic pursuit in addition to peer support and in our own personal experience. One of the reasons I went down that road is we found it to be, we live in a great time. People will talk about their experiences with addiction. Often the conversation would kind of dry up at the door to intimacy. And so I felt like I wanted a little bit more formal education so that people would feel comfortable talking about it with us. And that's actually exactly how it's played out. So it is, in fact, our niche.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you, too, for coming on here this late night session with us. I think this will be the first of several episodes that we have with you over the years, and cannot wait to have you back on again. And that's all we've got. So until next time, I am Matt.
I'm Paige.
And we'll see you.
Bye.